Nia's silver tray stopped inches from the empty chair reserved for Whitmore Crown's most powerful guest. The private dining room of Aurelia glowed beneath amber chandeliers, their light sliding over crystal stemware, ivory linen, and a black walnut table polished smooth as dark water. A string quartet murmured beyond the paneled doors. Truffle butter and cedar smoke hung in the warm air. Nia Bennett, 29, steadied the tray against her palm while 12 directors discussed a merger worth more than some cities. At the head sat Adrian Whitmore, 38, billionaire chairman of Whitmore Crown Holdings, his charcoal suit cut as sharply as the silence that followed his raised hand. He did not look at Nia. He looked at the place setting beside him. That chair is for our legal advisor. Nia's fingers tightened beneath the tray. The embossed card on the plate bore no name, only reserved. She had set the room herself and had noticed what everyone else had missed. The merger packet beside Adrian's hand carried a Bennett family seal pressed faintly into the red binding. The same seal appeared on the worn brass key hidden beneath her uniform collar. "Of course, Mr. Whitmore," she said. Her voice remained level. Adrian resumed speaking, but Nia did not leave. A director in a pearl gray jacket tapped his water glass with one manicured nail. "Is there a problem? The bottle assigned to this table is the wrong vintage." She lifted the burgundy before anyone could pour it. "The cellar sheet lists 1996. This is 2001. A few restrained laughs traveled across the walnut. To them, she had interrupted a billion-dollar conversation over a label. Adrian finally studied her, brown eyes steady, posture straight, a small burn scar crossing one wrist. Nothing in his expression suggested recognition. "Replace it," he said. Nia turned toward the service console, where the merger documents lay close enough for her to see a page loosen under the air vent. It fluttered once, exposing a paragraph marked Employee Retirement Trust. The print beneath it was smaller, but 3 words caught the chandelier light. Termination upon acquisition. Her breath shortened. Thousands of pensions were being placed on the table beside untouched bread and $600 wine. She set the bottle down rather than carry it away. That choice could cost her the job paying her mother's remaining medical debt, but letting the page disappear beneath a signature would cost strangers their futures. With a folded napkin, she covered the exposed clause as if clearing a crumb, then slid the page back into alignment before the nearest director noticed. Adrian noticed. His gaze moved from her hand to the document, then to the antique key at her throat as it slipped above her collar. For the first time, the cold rhythm of his meeting broke. "Where did you get that?" he asked. Nia tucked the key away. The paneled doors opened behind her, and Aurelia's manager entered with a seating chart clutched between damp fingers. He crossed the carpet quickly and whispered near Adrian's shoulder, but not softly enough. "Sir, she was told to remain with the service staff. She is not authorized to approach this table." Adrian's attention stayed on Nia. Around them, forks rested against porcelain. The quartet reached the end of a phrase, leaving only the low breath of the ventilation system. Nia lifted her tray again, knowing the next answer might take away the only stable life she had left. "I approached because someone at this table should read what they're buying." The manager's face hardened. Adrian leaned back, one hand covering the merger packet. Then he gave the empty chair beside him a brief, deliberate glance, and ordered Nia removed before dessert. The quartet's final note dissolved beneath the cold breath of the air conditioning, and the manager stepped between the private table and the service aisle. "Your tray, Nia." Candlelight flashed across the silver as Nia Bennett placed it in his waiting hands. She untied her black apron without lowering her eyes, its starched fabric rasping through the silence. Adrian Whitmore could have ended the spectacle with a nod. Instead, he rose from his chair, straightened the cuff of his charcoal jacket, and made the rejection his own. "You were hired to serve this table," he said, his voice measured enough to reach every guest without being raised. "Not to advise it. You will leave the private room, and you will not return." Crystal chimed softly as someone set down a wine glass. Heat from the wall sconces pressed against Nia's face, while a board member glanced at her plain shoes and smiled into his napkin. Another guest shifted the merger packet away from the edge, as though her touch might diminish its value. Adrian noticed the antique brass key beneath her collar again, the worn Bennett seal catching one blade of amber light. But the watching executives demanded certainty, not curiosity. His reputation rested on never surrendering control of a room. Understood, he asked. Nia folded the apron once, then again, making each edge exact. I understand that you've decided who is allowed to recognize danger. The manager reached for her elbow. She moved before his fingers landed, placing her employee badge on the white linen beside Adrian's untouched dessert spoon. No plea. No apology. The badge struck the table with a small plastic click that sounded louder than the quartet beginning another song. Escort her through the service corridor, Adrian ordered. The choice preserved his authority, but something shifted in the room. The guests resumed breathing too quickly, relieved that wealth had restored its familiar boundaries. Nia walked past velvet chairs and polished mahogany, carrying neither tray nor apron. At the paneled doors, a silver-haired director spoke without looking at her. Some people mistake overhearing business for understanding it. A few restrained laughs followed. Nia stopped beneath the chandelier. Its crystals scattered pale light across her face while the kitchen beyond the doors released a breath of steam, garlic, and scorched butter. She turned, not toward the man who had mocked her, but toward Adrian. Ask your attorneys why the Bennett seal appears on property schedules they claim are unencumbered. The laughter died. Adrian's hand settled over the packet. That was not a guess a waitress could make from carrying plates. Where did you learn that name? His question came sharper now. Nia drew the brass key from beneath her collar and held it openly. Age had darkened its grooves, but the stamped seal matched the faint emblem printed at the bottom of the merger documents. For the first time that evening, recognition disturbed Adrian's controlled expression, not recognition of her identity, but of the fact that she possessed standing no one at the table had accounted for. The manager opened the door and pointed toward the narrow corridor lined with stainless steel. Nia slipped the key into her palm. You rejected my warning because of the uniform, she said. Tomorrow, you can decide whether to reject the name attached to it. Then she stepped into the fluorescent glare, leaving her badge behind. The doors closed with a padded thud. Adrian remained standing as the Bennett seal gleamed beneath his hand. And on the other side of the wall, Nia opened her locker and removed a cream envelope stamped with that same crest. Inside was the one document that could force Whitmore Crown to let her through a door money alone could not close. Rain stippled the black windows of Whitmore Crown's headquarters at 8:07 the next morning, turning the city beyond them into streaks of silver and charcoal. In the marble lobby, the air smelled of lemon polish and fresh coffee, while elevator cables hummed behind walls no restaurant uniform was supposed to penetrate. Nia Bennett crossed the floor in a plain navy coat, the cream envelope tucked beneath one arm and the antique brass key warm inside her closed hand. Security stopped her before the private elevators. Legal Records Office, she said, placing the envelope on the stone counter. I'm exercising my inspection rights under the Bennett Minority Share Agreement. The guard glanced at the embossed crest, then at her inexpensive shoes. Unlike the guests at Aurelia, he did not laugh. He called upstairs. 12 minutes later, the elevator opened. Adrian stood inside beneath a ceiling of frosted glass, still wearing last night's white shirt, its collar unbuttoned and its cuffs creased. The merger packet rested beneath his arm. You could have requested a meeting, he said. I just did. Nia stepped into the elevator before he could invite her. The doors sealed with a muted chime. On the 42nd floor, Adrian led her into a legal conference room chilled to 68 degrees, where locked cabinets lined the walls and the carpet swallowed every footstep. 3 corporate attorneys waited beside a long walnut table. Nia opened the cream envelope and removed a notarized certificate, its paper thick and faintly yellowed at the edges. She set the brass key beside the Bennett seal stamped at its foot. My inherited shares are small, she said, but the inspection provision attached to them is not. One attorney adjusted his glasses, read the certificate, and passed it to the next without speaking. Adrian remained standing. How much do you own? Enough to see every legal schedule connected to a sale of Bennett-controlled assets. Then tell me who you are. Nia slid a written demand across the walnut. Recognize my standing first. Adrian's jaw tightened. Refusing her now would create a formal breach before his own counsel. Allowing her access would place a woman he had dismissed hours earlier inside the machinery of his largest acquisition. He picked up the certificate. The signature, seal, and registration number aligned perfectly with the dormant Bennett entry in Whitmore Crown's shareholder ledger. "Give her the files," he said. A digital lock clicked. Cabinets opened. For the first time, the barrier moved because Nia had commanded it to. She reviewed the pension schedules beneath a brass reading lamp, turning pages with deliberate fingers as the dry scent of old paper rose from the folders. Then she stopped at the termination clause from Aurelia and placed it beside a funding transfer dated 6 weeks earlier. "If you sign the final agreement, the employee pension trust becomes collateral," she said. "When the acquired company is restructured, thousands of workers lose the retirement money they spent decades earning." Adrian studied her across the pool of amber light. "Where did you learn to read transactions like this?" Nia closed the folder. "My identity is not the emergency in this room. It became my concern when your name appeared inside my deal." "Then earn the answer." She gathered neither the files nor the certificate, leaving both under the attorney's eyes. "Do not sign." Beyond the glass wall, board members began arriving, their voices sharpening as the meeting clock advanced. Adrian looked from the Bennett seal to the merger packet awaiting his signature. Nia had opened the door without his permission. Now the only question was whether his pride would make him close it on thousands of people. The boardroom clock clicked past 9 beneath white recessed lights, each second cutting through the low hum of ventilation. Leather chairs creaked around the 40-foot walnut table as directors waited for Adrian Whitmore to protect the certainty his name had always purchased. The preliminary memorandum lay before him, its signature page smooth beneath his fingertips. Across the room, Nia Bennett stood beside corporate counsel, her notarized certificate and antique brass key resting on the polished wood. "Delay this," one director said, "and the market will assume we have lost control." Another closed his tablet with a hard snap. "Our lenders were promised a signed framework today." Adrian looked at the pension clause Nia had marked. He could ask for 48 hours. He could accept that a woman he had removed from a dining room had seen what his advisors had missed. But beyond the glass walls, assistants and attorneys watched for the chairman, who never hesitated. "This memorandum is non-binding pending final verification," he said. Nia's eyes remained steady. "The market will not care what adjective you put in front of your signature." The room cooled beneath the air conditioning. Adrian uncapped his fountain pen. Black ink crossed the page. Nia did not argue again. She slipped the brass key into her coat pocket, took her share certificate, and walked out while the board applauded his resolve. By 7:14 the next morning, the applause had become the shrill chorus of ringing phones. Blue light from the trading screens washed Adrian's office in a sickly glow. A leaked forensic report had exposed forged authorizations in the merger records, the same compromised documents Nia had warned him not to legitimize. Whitmore Crown shares fell 12% before the opening bell, then 19%. Red numbers streamed downward without pause. Coffee cooled untouched beside Adrian's hand, its bitter smell mixing with hot printer toner as page after page arrived. 3 banks froze Whitmore Crown's revolving credit lines. A 4th demanded emergency collateral. Payroll reserves, active acquisitions, and the company's public standing were suddenly trapped behind compliance reviews. Adrian called the general counsel. "Tell me the leak is false." Paper rustled at the other end. "The signatures are forged." Her warning was accurate. The words left only the mechanical hiss of the speakerphone. Adrian stared at the preliminary memorandum bearing his name. Pride had lasted one night. Its invoice had arrived before breakfast. At 10:03, his black sedan stopped beneath Aurelia's gold awning. Adrian entered without an entourage, crossing a dining room scented with lemon polish and fresh bread. The manager hurried toward him, shoes striking the marble. "Mr. Whitmore, if this concerns last night, where is Nia Bennett?" The manager's rehearsed smile tightened. "She surrendered her badge. We have no reason to expect her back." Adrian went to the service station where she had once stood. Her locker was open and empty. No apron. No schedule. Only a pale rectangle on the metal where her name card had been removed. "Give me her address." Employee records require authorization. Adrian placed his phone on the counter. The screen showed Whitmore Crown falling again. "Get it." Minutes later, the manager returned with a personnel file. The address was outdated. Nia's number had been disconnected that morning. Adrian closed the folder slowly. For the first time, money, lawyers, and authority could not summon the woman he had dismissed. Somewhere beyond Aurelia's warm windows, Nia Bennett carried the answer to who she really was, and Adrian had until the opening bell tomorrow to find her before the banks decided Whitmore Crown was no longer worth saving. Rain hissed against the tinted windows of the town car, blurring Manhattan into ribbons of silver and red. Inside, the leather smelled faintly of cedar, while Adrian Whitmore held Nia's outdated address between two fingers and watched another lender's name flash across his phone. He silenced the call. "Take me there." The driver glanced at the rearview mirror. "Sir, the emergency board session begins in 40 minutes. Adrian removed his cuff links, slipped them into his coat pocket, and loosened the collar that had looked immaculate beneath Aurelia's chandeliers. "They can begin without me." The car stopped 6 miles north of Whitmore Crown's glass tower, outside a narrow brick building washed in the cold blue light of a laundromat sign. The brass entry panel was scratched smooth around the buttons. Adrian pressed Bennett. No answer. He pressed again. An elderly tenant opened the inner door with a canvas grocery cart and studied his tailored coat. "Nia hasn't lived here in 2 years. Do you know where she went?" "I know she worked 2 jobs and never let her mother miss an appointment." The woman's eyes settled on his polished shoes, already darkened by rain. "People who ignored her then keep asking questions now." The door clicked shut between them. Adrian remained beneath the leaking awning as his phone vibrated again. This time he answered. The board's lead director spoke over the muted rustle of papers. "Return immediately. We need you at the head of the table before the market opens." "No," the word vanished beneath a passing bus's roar. Adrian stepped into the rain and said it again. "I signed after a shareholder warned me the documents were compromised. Effective now, I am stepping aside from control of the crisis committee." Silence hardened on the line. "You would surrender authority during a collapse?" "I already used that authority to create one." He instructed corporate counsel to record his recusal, suspend negotiations, and grant Nia unrestricted access to every merger document if she returned. Then he ordered his own signature authority frozen until an independent review could determine what damage he had caused. The director warned that the board could make the removal permanent. Adrian looked through the laundromat window, where white shirts turned slowly behind fogged glass. "Then record that too." By the time he ended the call, the market was 12 minutes from opening, and the chairmanship he had protected at Aurelia was no longer entirely his. He could not command Nia to appear. He could only make himself someone she might choose to answer. Back in the car, he opened the employee file without searching for another hidden clue. Instead, he took out a sheet of Whitmore Crown letterhead and wrote by hand, the fountain pen scratching across the paper as rain drummed on the roof. "Nia Bennett, you warned me. I rejected your standing because accepting it would have required me to step down from certainty. I have done that now. Name the place. Name the terms. I will come without attorneys or security." He signed it, photographed the letter, and sent it through the only channel she had not disconnected, the formal shareholder contact listed on her certificate. 3 minutes passed. The opening bell sounded faintly from the driver's radio. Then a reply appeared. No greeting, no forgiveness, only an address and a time. Bennett Textile Archive. 6 p.m. Bring the preliminary memorandum. Come alone. Adrian stared at the words as the city's towers emerged through thinning rain. Nia had not agreed to save his company. She had agreed to let him stand before the door her family's key could open. Cold air drifted through the Bennett Textile Archive, carrying the dry scent of cedar drawers, machine oil, and cloth untouched for decades. Under amber work lamps, rows of iron looms stood in silence, their wooden shuttles suspended as if the last shift had ended only minutes ago. At exactly 6, Adrian Whitmore entered alone, the preliminary memorandum tucked beneath his arm. His phone remained in the town car. His authority remained frozen. Nia Bennett waited beside a scarred cutting table, no apron covering her dark blue suit, the antique brass key resting between her fingers. "Put the memorandum there." Adrian obeyed. The paper struck the wood with a soft, final sound. Nia fitted her key into a brass plate set beneath the table's edge. A shallow drawer released with a metallic click, revealing a leather ledger and an original copy of the Bennett Agreement. She did not offer either document to him. Instead, she opened the memorandum to the property schedules and placed the agreement beside it. The same family seal appeared on both pages. Your merger partner used Bennett land as collateral, she said. Land they never fully owned. Adrian studied the faded ink, then the termination clause he had ignored. The agreement gives your shares blocking authority. It gives me more than that. Nia turned one brittle page beneath the lamp. If Whitmore Crown activates this clause, the Bennett Trust can reclaim the mills and preserve the pension fund. But the company loses the manufacturing network supporting the merger. The heating pipes knocked inside the brick walls. Somewhere above them, wind pressed against old panes of glass. Adrian's hand hovered over the ledger. Then use it. Stop the deal. Nia's eyes remained steady. Reclaiming the mills would protect the workers. It would also trigger Whitmore Crown's default. Your lenders would dismantle what remains. That is my consequence. Not only yours. She drew a cream-colored instrument from the drawer. It transferred her inherited Bennett shares into an independent employee trust, surrendering her voting rights, future dividends, and any claim to the properties once the pension fund was secured. My mother spent her life believing this inheritance would return our family's name to these buildings, Nia said. Her thumb moved once across the embossed seal. If I sign, it never belongs to me again. Adrian looked from the document to the woman he had ordered removed for crossing an invisible line. At Aurelia, he had mistaken service for insignificance. Here, surrounded by the remains of her family's labor, she held enough power to punish him, and was preparing to give it away instead. You shouldn't have to lose your inheritance to repair my decision. This is not payment for your mistake. Nia picked up a fountain pen. It is protection from men who treat workers' futures as movable numbers. The nib scratched across the paper. Nia signed once, then pressed the Bennett seal into warm red wax. The shares that could have made her wealthy passed beyond her reach. In return, the employee trust gained permanent control over the pension assets. Adrian's empire could still collapse, but thousands of retirements could no longer be used to save it. Nia slid a second document toward him. Its blank signature line waited beneath the Whitmore Crown crest. Your recusal stopped you from making another unilateral decision, she said. This requires a different sacrifice. Adrian read the terms. They demanded a public admission, full cooperation with federal investigators, and permanent surrender of chairman authority if the independent board found that his pride had endangered the pension trust. If I sign this, I may never lead Whitmore Crown again. Nia closed the ledger, and the sound rolled through the archive like a judge's gavel. I just surrendered the only fortune my mother left me. She pushed the pen across the rough wood. Now decide what your name is worth. Adrian reached for it, but Nia covered the memorandum with her palm. Not yet. Before you sign away your power, you need to understand whose inheritance you were willing to erase. A brass pendulum clicked behind the archive wall, each swing measuring the silence between the pen and Adrian's hand. Amber light from a banker's lamp slid across the rough table, catching loose fibers in the original Bennett agreement and the pale indentation where Nia's antique key had rested. Nia removed her palm from the memorandum, but kept the pen. My mother wasn't born into this inheritance, she said. From the bottom of the ledger, she lifted a faded employee badge sealed beneath cloudy plastic. The photograph showed a younger woman with Nia's eyes. Under it, the name read Evelyn Bennett. The archive smelled of dust, machine oil, and old cotton. Adrian leaned closer as Nia placed the badge beside an Aurelia name tag, the one she had surrendered after he ordered her removed. 2 uniforms. 2 generations. The same surname. Evelyn started on the Whitmore Bennett mill floor at 17, Nia said. Her fingertip traced a column of names stitched into the ledger's margin. When the mills were failing, she organized the workers who surrendered part of every paycheck to keep them open. My grandfather, Samuel Bennett, created the pension covenant in return. He gave those workers minority ownership, then placed his own family shares behind the same promise. Adrian looked from the handwritten covenant to Nia. Samuel Bennett was your grandfather. Yes. The word landed without triumph. Nia opened the ledger to its final page. There, beneath Samuel's signature, was Evelyn's, first as an employee representative, later as the legal heir to the Bennett stake. My mother inherited his shares, but she never lived like an heiress. The dividends were locked behind the pension protections. When Whitmore Crown absorbed the mills, she spent years making sure your attorneys could not separate the workers from what they had earned. Adrian's cuff brushed the table, loud against the stillness. He remembered Nia carrying crystal glasses beneath Aurelia's chandeliers, while men at his table discussed the pension fund as collateral. He had seen a uniform and mistaken service for insignificance. "Why work there?" he asked. Nia slid the Aurelia badge toward him. Its pin scraped softly over the wood. "Because my mother's treatments consumed everything we could access without breaking the covenant. I worked nights at Aurelia and mornings wherever they would hire me. I kept the Bennett name off my application because I wanted wages, not favors." The radiator knocked in the corner. Outside the narrow windows, rain ticked against the glass. Adrian picked up the badge but did not close his fingers around it. "You could have entered my boardroom years ago and been treated as a surname instead of a person." Nia met his gaze. "At Aurelia, you showed me what your respect depended on." The words left no room for defense. Adrian set the badge down as carefully as if it were evidence against him. "You were the legal heir protecting the workers I was prepared to endanger." "I was a waitress protecting them," Nia replied. "That should have been enough for you to listen." She turned the original agreement toward him and placed the pen across its margin. Then she withdrew the memorandum requiring his surrender and laid it beyond his reach. Adrian's hand stopped over the empty space. "You don't get to sign because the woman you rejected turned out to be a Bennett," she said. "You sign only if you would make the same choice for the next woman wearing a badge, with no inheritance and no power to make you regret ignoring her." The clock continued its cold, even count. Adrian removed the Whitmore signet ring from his finger and placed it beside Nia's discarded name tag. For the first time, the crest looked smaller than the uniform. "Then put me before the independent board," he said. "Let them decide whether I deserve the authority attached to this ring." Nia did not return the memorandum. She closed her hand around it and stood. "They meet at 9 tomorrow morning. Publicly." The banker's lamp threw her shadow across the Whitmore crest as she walked toward the archive door. Behind her, Adrian remained at the table, stripped of the excuse that he had rejected a stranger, and facing the harder question of whether he could surrender power without knowing if it would ever be returned. Rain silvered the courthouse windows by 8:45, and the hearing chamber smelled of wet wool, old oak, and coffee left too long on a warmer. Camera shutters rattled behind the public rail as directors took their seats beneath hard white lights. Adrian entered without security, without counsel, and without the Whitmore signet ring. Nia was already seated opposite him, the preliminary memorandum resting beneath her palm. The board lead director leaned toward Adrian. "If you surrender authority today, the removal may become permanent." Adrian pulled out his chair. Its wooden legs scraped across the floor. "I understand." At 9 precisely, the clerk activated the microphones. A red light appeared before every seat, small and unforgiving. Nia rose first. Her dark jacket concealed the white service shirt she had worn at Aurelia, but the old name badge lay beside her documents. She submitted the original Bennett agreement, the employee trust instrument, and the forged merger authorizations into the public record. Then she moved that Whitmore Crown suspend the merger, preserve every pension account, and appoint independent investigators with full access to company files. The lead director studied the trust document. "Ms. Bennett, once this transfer is recorded, you cannot reclaim the shares, dividends, or property rights." Nia uncapped a fountain pen. "That is why the workers can trust it." The nib whispered across the paper. With one signature, the inheritance Evelyn Bennett had protected and Samuel Bennett had built, passed beyond Nia's personal control. No board member could buy it. No Whitmore chairman could leverage it. Not even Nia could take it back. Adrian watched the clerk press a seal into the page, the dry snap carrying through the chamber. Nia had answered the last doubt about her purpose. She had not come to seize his empire. She had made herself poorer to keep thousands of workers from becoming poorer still. The lead director turned to Adrian. "Your statement." Adrian opened the preliminary memorandum. For several seconds, only rain and camera mechanisms filled the room. Then he placed the pages beneath the document camera, exposing his signature to every screen. "I was warned before I signed," he said. "The warning was specific, lawful, and correct. I rejected it because I decided the person delivering it did not belong at my table." A murmur moved through the gallery. Adrian signed 3 resolutions: permanent termination of the merger, full cooperation with federal investigators, and immediate transfer of his voting authority to the independent board. The final page contained no guarantee of reinstatement. His pen stopped above it. Across the table, Nia said nothing. She did not rescue him from the consequence or soften its edge. Adrian signed. The board lead director collected the resolution and announced that his authority was suspended effective immediately. Phones lit throughout the chamber. Whitmore Crown no longer belonged to Adrian's command. The decision could not be withdrawn. Nia then slid the surrender memorandum toward the clerk, but kept one finger on its corner. "The trust is permanent," she said. "His surrender is public. One matter remains before this document takes effect." Her eyes settled on Adrian, steady beneath the cold lights. Mr. Whitmore must answer the woman he removed from his table, not Samuel Bennett's granddaughter, not a shareholder, and not an heir. The chamber fell silent as Nia placed her Aurelia badge beside his and signed acknowledgement. "Would you make the same choice if I had been only this?" The ventilation hummed above the chamber, stirring air that smelled of old paper and burnt coffee. Beneath the cold white lights, Nia's Aurelia badge lay beside the surrender memorandum, its scratched brass edge catching a narrow strip of glare. Adrian looked at it for a long moment. Then he moved away from the witness table and stood where no microphone, attorney, or corporate seal could shield him. "No," he said. The word landed hard enough to draw a breath from the gallery. "I would not have made the same choice." His voice remained level, but his empty ring finger pressed against his palm. "If you had been only a waitress, I would have dismissed you again. Not because your warning lacked merit, but because I had decided your uniform made you unworthy of being heard." A camera shutter snapped. Adrian did not turn. "I rejected you before I knew who you were. Learning your name exposed my prejudice. It did not create your dignity." Nia lifted her finger from the memorandum, but she did not sign. The paper remained still between them. "And now?" she asked. Adrian picked up the Aurelia badge carefully. The metal was cool against his fingertips, its surface worn by years of trays, double shifts, and rooms where powerful people rarely learn the names of those serving them. He crossed the polished floor and offered it back without lowering himself into a performance of apology. "Now I know the question was never whether you belonged at my table," he said. "It was whether I deserved a place at yours." Nia accepted the badge, then placed it in her coat pocket. Respect offered after discovering an inheritance can still be another transaction. "Then I will not ask you to trust me," Adrian replied. "And I will not ask for reinstatement. Let what I do without authority answer what my words cannot." That was the final cost. Not wealth, title, or control, all of which had already been surrendered, but the certainty that remorse would earn forgiveness. Nia studied him beneath the fluorescent glare. His tailored jacket was creased from the witness chair, no signet marked his hand, and no security detail waited behind him. For the first time, Adrian Whitmore possessed nothing that could compel her response. She turned to the clerk. The soft drag of paper across oak sounded louder than the cameras. Nia signed the final acknowledgement, making the surrender memorandum effective, then added one sentence in the margin: "Dignity shall never depend upon title, occupation, inheritance, or invitation." The clerk stamped it. The employee trust took permanent control of the Bennett protections. The merger remained terminated. Adrian's suspension stood without guarantee of review. Nia capped the pen and faced him. "At Aurelia, you decided there was no seat for me." Adrian held her gaze. "I was wrong." "Yes," she said, "but I'm not offering you the seat you denied me." A murmur traveled through the chamber and faded. Nia extended her hand, not as an Arab solving a billionaire, nor as a waitress asking to be recognized, but as an equal setting the only terms that mattered. "You may earn the right to stand beside the people you failed." Adrian took her hand. No applause followed. Only the dry click of the clerk closing the file and morning light warming the edge of the table where power had finally learned to listen. And that day, the world remembered that dignity needs no inheritance to prove its worth.